stories. I was 18. I made an effort to make friends after I moved onto campus and ended up with a few groups to hang out with, including a new girlfriend and plenty of people from my classes that I liked well enough. There was one class before lunch where it was traditional for people to go to the cafeteria afterwards to eat in pairs of threes. I wasn't very discerning about who I'd have lunch with because I got on fine with most people from the class, and we were all trying to make an effort to be social. So when one girl, Lily, asked if I wanted to eat lunch together after that class, I didn't have any reason not to go. We talked about work and nothing noteworthy, but she asked me to get lunch with her again the next week. It became a pattern, and there wasn't exactly a way to start saying no suddenly. It was fine, but it did mean I lost the chance to eat lunch with anyone else on those days. In hindsight, I suppose that was the point. Megan was starting to unsubtly hint that she had a crush on me. I tried not to address it because what was I going to say? I've never known what to do when a friend makes a pass at me. I was also not interested in the least. Even ignoring the weird stuff she pulled, Megan was not my type at all. She tended to dress and act in a way somewhere between a 50s housewife and one of those adults who is still obsessed with Disney princesses, if you can picture that. Things took an uncomfortable turn one day of our last shared class of the year. Instead of asking me to lunch like usually, Megan asked if I'd go for a walk with her again. I didn't exactly know how to refuse, so I said alright. Our campus was bordered by a large patch of woodland. Megan led me into the woods, and the sounds of our fellow students slowly faded away. She sat down on a log and I joined her. She started talking about how she was going to miss me over the winter. I think I tried to make an excuse about having plans with my girlfriend, but before I could leave, Megan chose to kiss me without warning. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. I got out of there and was happy to think I wouldn't see her for a while. I came back to university after the winter, moving into a house with a few of my friends. Without going off topic, there were some serious issues in my friend group, a lot of petty arguing and worse. I broke up with my girlfriend around the start of that year as well, and basically the whole mess made me recontextualize things with Megan because it suddenly didn't seem as bad. That said, I didn't want to be alone with her. We mostly talked online. She was still constantly messaging me after all. One upside of everything was that I started dating a boy. Megan was not pleased to hear that news. I think she hoped to sneak in after I broke up with my girlfriend, but as I said before, that was never going to happen. There wasn't a big gap between my breakup with this new relationship, so she must have thought she missed her chance to be with me. At this time, I was fairly active on Tumblr. I occasionally talked about my life and mostly reblogged photos and stuff. I was on there one day when something odd happened. One of the blogs I followed had received asked with some phrases I recognized. It took a second to register that it was taken from my About page. That made me freeze. I read the message properly. Someone was asking this completely random person to analyze a section of text from my page, asking for their opinion on the type of person who would write this. I cannot stress how messed up it was to see people talking about me like I was a character in a book they were trying to study. The reply was basically, I don't know, sorry, but the important thing was that the question hadn't been anonymous. It linked to someone's blog. Obviously, I wanted to know who had taken such a bizarre interest in me. As far as I knew, no one in real life other than my boyfriend knew about my page. Well, no prizes for guessing who was behind it. What I found was a shrine. She was using a fake name, but I recognized Megan. All over that thing, it was this cutesy pink and red page. There were a few posts about her interest, but most of the content was focused on her primary interest, me. Most of the posts were about me. There were accounts of things I'd done recently, as well as references to things from as far back as I'd known her. It was clear she had been keeping tabs on me both online and offline, gathering up every scrap of information she could about my life and hoarding it here in her collection. She talked about us eating lunch together and how special our dates had been to her, as if it was anything more than acquaintances getting food after class. She talked about the time she had forcefully kissed me in the woods, but she wrote it as if it had been mutual. She quoted lyrics from my favorite song and talked about how she had always been there for me, no matter who else came into my life. Lots of references to loving me just the way he is, which answered another mystery about an anonymous love letter I'd received earlier that year with the same wording. It got worse. There were lots of posts about my boyfriend as well. These weren't so nice. They got vicious, talking about how he didn't deserve me. He didn't know what he had. If she was with me, she'd be jealous of anyone else who came near me. So my boyfriend, not being a jealous person, meant he didn't love me. It was angry and hateful. I didn't like to think about the sort of person who could write so obsessively, being fixated on me. One thing that didn't make sense at first was that the blog also made plenty of references to Megan's best friend, Steven. She had never mentioned this person to me. Her post talked a lot about Steven and how great of a friend he was and how much fun they had together, how he looked out for her, etc. I was trying to work out whether this was an online friend when specific post made it all click. She had posted a photo and captioned it with, "Steven sent me this. He knew I would like it and I loved it," or something like that. The problem was the photo was taken from my own page. I hadn't sent it to her. She took it from my page and then claimed this fictional best friend of hers shared it with her. Because in her head she had split me into two people. In her messed up fantasy life, I was both the perfect best friend who was always looking out for her and her soulmate who was bound to end up with her when I finally got over my sweet, kind boyfriend and all the other easy girls I hung out with. She made dozens of posts complaining about. I sent Megan a message confronting her about the blog. She said nothing, and I can't stress how weird it was to have found pages and pages dedicated to me, with her talking about how she was in love with me and would make sure we ended up together, slamming my boyfriend and building up a fantasy life with two different versions of me in it that she'd clearly believed to be real, then acting like it hadn't happened. She said nothing. She didn't address it. She just changed the subject, even after I pushed. And it was like she hadn't even registered what I said. I've never seen anything else like it. She deleted the page, of course, or at least changed the name and hid it so I never found it again. It wasn't the end, though. I wasn't going to hang out with her anymore. But we were still shoved together in classes, and she had started to actually scare me with what she might do next. I'm kind of a paranoid person. Knowing someone was obsessively keeping track of me for who knows how long freaked me out. The next thing she tried to do was seduce my boyfriend. It was absolutely useless attempt that only made him uncomfortable. He told me about it right away. What was her plan there? Did she hope to tell me he cheated and waited for me to break up with him? Why would I want her after that? When that didn't work out for her, she tried hitting on 3 of my other friends. None of them took the bait. She ended up dating one of my former housemates for a while, but made sure to send me messages while they were together letting me know she'd rather be with me. No thanks. I used to live in a real rough area. I'm talking a super low-income apartment complex in southeastern Tennessee that had been raided by the Drug Task Force and cleared out multiple times in the past. The apartment complex was pretty spread out, with a lot of roads linking them all together. This place was almost like a small village, I guess, because most people in the complex would wander around outside or sit outside their apartment, and they would just socialize or do shady shit. A lot of small meth labs, dealers, and that sort of thing. They didn't tend to have a lot of problems because of a former addict myself. I didn't tend to be the snitching or moralizing sort. As long as whatever fuckery you were up to didn't impact or involve me, I didn't really give a fuck, as long as nobody was getting actively harmed. So that's who I was. The quiet gay guy who lived with his boyfriend and 4 cats, who didn't fuck with anybody, but on the few incidents I'd be fucked with, I'd been known to not back down, so I wasn't often fucked with. People who also didn't tend to start shit with each other there, mostly just outsiders, and while I didn't make friends, I was at least a known member of the community as I lived there for about 2 years. I did not have the option to move out. I was poor as hell, and between me and my ex, I was the only one working. I was able to keep up with us and the cats fed and bills paid, but that was literally it, and sometimes I struggled to do that. At least the bills part. Can't say any of us ever went hungry, even if what we were eating was low-grade shit. I drove a shitty old 2001 Jeep Grand Cherokee at the time. This vehicle was such a piece of shit that every time I got into it and turned the key, I'd pray to God, hoping that this wasn't the day that it finally stopped working. The vehicle had a ton of problems, some of which I managed to fix on my own, others not so much. That said, it was my lifeline, the only way I had to get to work. I'm not quite sure how this happened, but somehow word got around that I was trying to sell my Jeep. This was obviously not true because I needed the damn thing and knew it wasn't worth enough to sell in order to assure I could buy another vehicle. Nonetheless, I started having people approach me about it, offering me painfully low sums of money before I turned them away. I tried my damnedest to kill the for sale rumor, but it persisted up until the day I moved out of state and never looked back. So, one night, toward the end of my tenure at the complex after me and my ex had split and he moved out, I was alone and gaming on my PC. I believe I was playing Tekken. I heard a loud, frantic series of knocks at my front door. These apartments were small and shitty, so it was within visible eyesight of my bed in the bedroom, and this dude was knocking loudly. I get up, already stretched out because of the hour, and grabbed the knife I had and looked through the peephole. I could not really see anything because it was so dark, so I talked through the door. I asked who it was and what they wanted, in a commanding, almost aggressive tone, because I wasn't trying to look vulnerable. For reference, I'm just under 6 foot, around 220 pounds. I'm by no means small or weak. That said, I'm also not a one-man army or some kind of badass. I'm just as human as anyone else, and while I'm not one to run away from a fight, I'm also not the idiotic type to run towards them. I heard nothing at first, so I asked again. Nothing again. I stood there, trying to listen for a few minutes before returning to the bedroom, and a few minutes later, I heard the knocking start once again. This time, I went to my window to see if I could see anyone outside at all, and I saw several shadows lurking near my Jeep, parked just outside. Now at this point, I was worried that they were going to try to break into it or steal it, so this time I actually opened the door. Standing in the little alley thing in front of my door was a group of 3 individuals. I only recognized one, who was standing in front of the other 2. I'd seen him around the complex and knew he lived there. I'm still packing the knife, but I'm not brandishing it at this point. I asked again what he wants and what the hell these people are doing knocking on my door at 1 a.m. and lingering around my Jeep. He said he heard it was for sale and he wanted to buy it, offering me the pitiful amount of money he had on him, legit, like $30 for it, and said him and his boys were just checking it out. I told him, look man, the Jeep isn't for sale. I don't know what the fuck you heard. And even if the Jeep was for sale, I wouldn't sell it to you for $30 fucking dollars. Now please, get the fuck off my property. After this, he gestured for his buddies to come over, and now I had 3 people standing shoulder to shoulder in the hallway leading up to my door, doing their best to intimidate me, before the guy asked in a real fucked up tone, "You sure about that, boy?" Before I said, "Yeah, the fuck I am." After which I revealed the knife and ejected the blade from the handle. This was a larger knife with full brass knuckle guards and spike at the bottom of them. Not your typical small pocket knife by any means. His response to this was to call me a pussy for bringing out a weapon, to which I responded something along the lines of, "Says the motherfucker who comes here 3 deep," to which he just laughed at me. The sight of the knife did not put him off at all. I guess he figured I'd be too scared to use it, and that they could rush me before I got the chance. When I saw them inching their way forward, I sprung into action and started wildly thrusting and slashing the blade around in their general direction with wild abandonment, showing I had 0 issues with potentially killing or injuring all of them. I knew I was not likely to win a 3-on-1 fight, even with a knife, but I made it goddamn clear that if I was going down, I was taking at least one of them with me. They backed up and started spewing shit talk at me, including calling me a faggot and other choice words. I was known to be gay, even if most people act surprised when I tell them. I kept moving towards them as they backed up, showing that at this point they either were going to leave or someone was going to get stabbed. By the time I got to the end of the hallway, to the lot where my Jeep was parked, I noticed 2 more people standing by the Jeep and internally swore at myself for just not going back inside. But I was in too deep now. At this point, I went all in and started yelling at the top of my lungs, acting like a bloodthirsty lunatic who was just out to hurt people in a similar manner to how people try to scare bears away. I was just trying to be as loud and as threatening as possible to really sell the idea that even if they took me out, at least one of them might end up dead as a result. And to be honest, I fully intended for it to go that way if the shit popped off. One of the guys by my Jeeps then brandished what looked to be a piece of wood at me as a threat, to which I responded, "Come at me with that stick and I'll slit your goddamn throat, you stupid motherfucker." I remember saying this very well because one of the other guys thought it was the funniest shit in the world and started laughing. Not in a "you won't do it" sort of way, but in a manner that seemed like I was genuinely entertaining him. I was so hyped on adrenaline, my response to this was to slash at him, as he was one of the closer ones to me, at which he swore at me before running off and all the rest followed suit. After this, I went back inside and stayed awake until sunrise to make sure that they did not come back before finally falling asleep on the couch by the door so I could hear if anything else happened outside and hopefully wake up if it did. Nothing more happened, and the next day after, I saw the guy who initialized the standoff with me as I was getting home from work. He followed me up to my apartment where I parked and apologized for what had happened. He said he was high at the time and also drunk, so he was feeling extra stupid. I told him not to fucking do it again. He then quickly approached me and hugged me in this real bro sort of way. I went along with it and told him to have a nice day before going back inside and settling down. I had no more incidences with him and his buddies ever again after this. Even though I played it off as not caring, it was mostly just to avoid further conflict. So, to the whacked out meth head and his friends who decided it was all in their best interest to intimidate me into selling my vehicle for $30, let's definitely not ever fucking meet again. Growing up in my childhood home was a treat. There was woods to play in and a creek at the very edge of the backyard filled with creatures and muck and relics from its past life as Boy Scout camping grounds. My 3 siblings and I, ages 6 to 16, used to run freely through the woods, bathing by the sunning banks of the creek in summer in swimwear, playing hide-and-seek by the campfire in autumn with other children. We loved it. I particularly loved being out in nature and would spend long hours sitting out in the woods very still and watching things come to life around me. Birds, squirrels, frogs. I trained myself to be drawn to their movement so I could spot them and learn more about them. Wintertime always meant life coming to a chilling standstill, and there was much less to see in the unforgiving tundra. When going outside was so cold that the snot freezes in your nose, you are much less inspired to spend much time outdoors. And as a 13-year-old girl just discovering boys could be cute instead of irritating, I was spending more and more time on my pink Razor cell phone. Sitting on a chair in my parents' bedroom, chatting to one of my guy friends as I am watching dusk fall upon a snowy January woodscape, I spot movement very far away, all the way to the creek. It is not an animal. My friend asked if I had been listening to him since I stopped responding. I told him that I think that there is a man in my backyard. He is heavily wrapped up and booted to traverse the scathing conditions, but he is not walking. He is standing by a tree facing my parents' large windowed house. I heard my siblings running and laughing in the festively lit living room next to me. As I peered out the window of the dark room, my friend asked what the man is doing, and we're both giggling. This situation seems a bit ridiculous. He's just staring at my house like a total weirdo, and I liked it to The Shining when Jack chases Danny through the snowy maze just off his tits. He didn't look like he had any hunting gear with him, just a small plastic bag in hand, contents unknown. I carried on with my conversation and kept an eye on him as he stared catonically at my house for a quarter of an hour. Then again, Movement triggers my attention as the man sets his bag on the ground and begins to take off his coat and gloves. I am definitely interested in what's going on now. It's far too freezing to surrender any layers this time of year. Next, the pants come down, and I am incredulous. Could he be that desperate for a piss? My friend is no longer laughing on the other end of the phone and asks me to describe to him exactly what is happening. Well, he's got his thing in his hand, and he's, I don't know exactly what the fuck he's doing. Like, making a dance. My friend asks if that means that it looks like he's jiggling his dick, and I confirmed. He told me to alert my parents and have them call the police right away. I hung up with him and did just that. The police showed up, and upon sight the man took off. The man was chased through the woods and dove into the far below freezing creek waters in an attempt to flee. This successfully evaded capture momentarily, but he was later identified, a 50-something-year-old man with the mental capacity of a 12-year-old. Intellectual disabilities are a valid behavioral explanation, but this man also has a long record of watching, stalking, and in one instance, running over and tackling a 9-year-old girl on her family swing set because he wanted to play. He was under the care of his brother, but was encouraged to leave the house as much as possible to roam freely, which he did, walking up to 17 miles a day through neighborhoods and playgrounds. He knew where children played and where they lived. My parents learned all of this when his brother came over to our house to explain why I testified in court against the man. His house would have been labeled as the residence of a sex offender, which is not great. He apologizes for his brother's jerking off to their house full of children, but again, needed to protect his own interest. When it came to testify in court, I was in the room with the prosecutor and my father. The prosecutor was aware the brother had made a trip to our house and confirmed the sexual activity and went to take a statement from them. Several minutes later, he re-entered the room and let us know we did not need to testify, as although the brother had vehemently refused any sexual disorder took place, he proceeded to state that the man had an upset stomach, needed to use the bathroom, and removed his pants to do so, which is almost likely what was seen. I guess, in the eyes of the law, indecent public exposure is indecent public exposure, and it's actually better to shit your pants than become a sex offender. However, I will never forget my first live-action tutorial of masturbation, something that at 13 I had heard about in theory but never pictured or seen. It wasn't stomach pain relief this man was seeking, it was sexual relief. In the midst of the freezing January winds, right where that red mark is in the woods, nothing has ever creeped me out more.